if you can ignite that passion in people, that motivation in people, give them a little autonomy, mastery, and then give them a purpose, I think you'll find that's what you'll hear from them. They may not know it that way, but that's what they'll probably come back and say. They were able just to ignite people's passion about the purpose and bring them together and get stuff done.
Hi, and welcome to the podcast. This is MK Palmore, host of Amplified, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. Today as my guest, I have Paul Carney, who's an HR executive leading teams in the HR space. On this episode, Paul and I digest everything from emotional intelligence to fostering teams in a new environment, and all things, of course, AI and technology and its potential impact on the working landscape. I hope you enjoy this episode. All right, let's jump right into it. Paul, what would you describe as the state of leadership today in the corporate space?
You know, the state of leadership, there's a couple of things unfolding out there. One of the main things I think people are dealing with is how to move people up the path, basically how to get people from individual contributor to that leader and that first time leader. And then what I call LOL, leader of leaders, because that's another whole jump when you go to that level. So it's helping people understand what that is. In fact, back in the day, we did a program. It was a one-day program for people. We jokingly called it So You Think You Want to Lead, because we taught them, here's what leadership really means. Half the class, when they left that day, were like, yeah, I'm excited. And the other half were like, nope, that's not what I want to sign up for.
I don't want any part of that. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I think part of it is helping people understand what is leadership. And it's a little bit different than management, managing a project, managing that. But when you get to leading people, it's a little bit different.
Yeah. You touch on a very important area. When was it the first time that you kind of recognized yourself that different levels of responsibility require different types of leadership skills? There's a difference between running a team of 10 people and running an organization of 1,000. As you discussed, sort of the leader of leaders type of approach. What's the biggest jump or challenge you think people have from leaving that sort of small team environment that's rather easily managed to something massive and big? What's the thing that people grapple with?
Yeah, I think it's there's two things, and it's both a strategic and a tactical. The strategic part is that they've got to think more strategically. They've got to really start to think big picture. And as you know, and I know, when you start to move up an organization, especially to get into an executive level, you've got to understand the entire organization. Because while you've got one area, you might be IT, you might be finance, you might be HR, you still have to understand how the entire organization operates in order to run your division, your department, to satisfy everything's needed. But the other part of it is, and we're seeing this more and more today, is maybe 20, 30 years ago, a lot of leaders they just led, right? They had their team doing everything and they just kept everything going. Today, we've got active leaders who are still doing things, still doing actively their job. If they got promoted out of a position into a leadership, some of them are still doing the tactical things, right?
Right.
Well, that has to stop when you get to the leader of leader and above. You have to start focusing on developing those leaders to lead their teams. And I've seen a lot of that struggle happen where people still try to stay involved in the weeds, try to do some of the work because they miss it. They loved it, especially if they're professionals. Yeah. They loved that work. Well, especially leading leaders, you've got to step away from that work a little bit, delegate, which again is huge, and then help develop those leaders to develop their teams. And like you said, the further up you get to the organization, now you're leading teams of teams of teams, and it's even tougher.
I had a conversation with a colleague this past weekend, also a retired FBI agent, and we talked about sort of what were the highlights of our career, just sort of in passing. And I made the statement to him that, I had a defined period where I was actually on the street doing investigations and sort of this real sort of rugged aspect of the career. It was everything that I had signed up for. And that was, looking back on it, probably the height of the time where I was really just enjoying every aspect of the job. And then I made the statement that, when I stepped into management, everything changed. Yeah. Everything changed. How you looked at the job changed. What you got out of the job changed. And I think there's absolutely something to making sure that you spend time understanding what that new reality might look like. So if there are things that you enjoy that are like hands-on, hey, I want to roll up my sleeves and get into the weeds of this, you probably should not be signing up for increasing levels of responsibility, because the further you get away from the work, I think the more the job just completely changes. And sometimes it could be just completely different than what you would expect it to be.
Right. And especially if it's what we call those high professional jobs where you just get passionate about a very specific scientific field or a very professional level role. And that gets harder and harder. In fact, one of the things we taught folks was that's why we did that 1-day class was, do you really know what this means? And then when they did, we say, okay, we put them through a 2-day class and say, here's what it really means in your area. We even had to go back, and in this one organization I worked in, very highly functional HR function, we had to go back and, because the classic leadership path, people, the high professionals, whether it's technical, scientific, they move up to level 1, level 2, level 3. Well, then they move into management because that's where the money is, right? To keep moving. Right. We actually had to create a level 5 in some of our very technical roles, and we called it the high technical path. So we divided people into, or you want high technical or do you want more leadership, and not drive people into leadership, because we found also, and I think you've seen this, those people who are passionate and really good in their field aren't necessarily the best leaders of people. So identify that and give those people a path to continue to learn and grow. Now, it got tougher and tougher. These people had to attend their professional worldwide organization conferences, speak. They had to really up their game so that they were well known. But we gave them that path.
That's an amazing decision to make. I think that much of the tech industry could benefit from an approach like that, because what I'm seeing currently in the tech industry is this what I call an over-indexing on technical skills and capabilities, and people make that assumption that folks with a high level of technical acumen are naturally poised and ready to lead, when in fact, in many, many instances, it's the complete opposite of that. Not only are they not ready, they don't have the experience in terms of leadership, their technical skills oftentimes don't translate to the types of skills that are needed for running organizations that are large, requires you to engage directly with your team of leaders and so forth. I see it as a big gap, and I'm not even sure that as an industry that folks are paying attention to that.
You're right. And one of the other factors that comes in, and I have worked with a lot of folks on this, I can't say we figured it out exactly in the different organizations I've been in, but some people will have a hard time when the individuals, those high professionals, are making more money than the leader. Because everyone's like, well, the leader must make more money. I'm like, I've had a couple of times that I've managed some teams, some consultants up in the Washington, D.C. area who were very technical. They were really good at what they did, and they made more money than I did. But that was okay, because my job was to get them out there making money and making us money as an organization. Yeah. But in terms of salary-wise, they made more than I did because they had a very specific skill set. And that's going to happen. But sometimes that gets a hard time for people to wrap their head around.
Where's your passion for leadership come from? Like what is it about the discipline that attracts you?
I'm a high school math teacher by trade. That's what I started. My first college job out of college was a high school math teacher. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually a teacher. I love to help people learn and grow. And then through my 3-time tech entrepreneurship and starting companies and building them, and then we'd sell them off and go to the next thing. And then landing in HR probably 15 years ago. It's my passion is watching people learn. I had a person come up to me today, 2 people come up to me at a little HR luncheon we had, telling me all the stuff they're doing with AI, because they know we talk about it, I've helped them. And then they come back and they show me this greatest thing they did. And it's like, I jokingly say, it's like this kid bringing home their little drawing from school saying, look what I'm doing. And it's fun. I like to see their eyes light up. That to me gives me that feeling.
Right. Is leadership easily taught, or is it a challenge to teach it?
And that goes back to sometimes, and we've had these philosophical debates, is it a natural talent that everyone either has or doesn't, or is it something you can teach people? Yeah. I think it is, I wouldn't say easily taught, but I think one of the things, and we've gotten better at this over the years, one foundational piece that you have to have in place and you have to develop well to be a good leader is emotional intelligence. You've got to understand yourself. You've got to understand how you operate, how you impact others. Without that, it's really hard to be a strong, impactful leader. Now, does that mean that some of the best leaders or some of the leaders who get things done are always the most intelligent, emotional intelligence? Probably not. We know some in history that probably didn't represent it well. They got things done, but they did it through a certain method that didn't necessarily leave a group of people behind them who could do the job and take over when they weren't there.
Don't leave that point for a second. Why do you think that works sometimes?
Because in the end, people are just looking for results. It's that classic thing is if stuff is getting done and innovation's happening and people are excited and investors are making money, they don't care the wake they're leaving behind about how all those people look behind or how they feel. And then, half of them are probably afraid of their job. They don't look deeper to say, well, did you really develop a culture of people who can sustain, or is it you just got something done? And I think there's been examples in history, and there's still some out there probably right now that are in that same mode and aren't leaving that legacy organization.
No, I think that there are some clear examples, both active and historical, well documented, where we've seen folks who, from an EQ standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, probably didn't practice the best of the discipline, but still achieved just these wildly out of the ordinary, massive results that put them in iconic places in terms of what they were able to accomplish, which is strange to me. I agree with you. First of all, I think that there's something to the people just want the results aspect of that particular field. But I do think that if we were to study case-wise these case one after another, that there would be some very, very similar elements and variables that you'd be able to put into place where you've seen folks practice what might be considered poor examples of leadership and still achieve maximum results. So that might be an interesting thing to pursue.
Yeah, some of that, honestly, I think some of that lands on the charisma concept.
Yeah.
Some people, even though they're not being treated well, because you look at them and say, why in the world you smart people are working for this person who's not necessarily the nicest, but they've got a charisma that keeps them engaged. They know just enough. They know that the top leader knows just enough how to stroke the ego and keep people engaged and stuff. Some people call it manipulation, but it's really persuasion and that charisma. So I think if we look, some of those examples we're probably looking at, they were very charismatic people who just kept it all going and until they weren't there anymore. That's the problem, is when that charisma, that special person's not there, it's not going to work as well.
Are there one or two characteristics that stand out for you that you've seen, in past leaders that you've worked with and for, that are just, hey, if you have these 2 or 3 capabilities or characteristics, you just tend to excel in the field of leadership? Is there anything that comes to mind?
So it's funny because I jokingly say this when I talk about networking classes and stuff, and say that charisma is not the one necessarily that's going to get you there. You can do all this stuff without that. But I think that the first one is you have to care. You have to care about something, and caring about humans actually even helps even more. But you've got to care about something. It can't just be you're doing the thing to get to the means to the end. You've got to care that the process you're using and developing, and that you develop yourself to continue. If you don't, and good leaders, another quality is that continuous learning. Now, people will say it quite lightly, but I think it's good leaders are always reevaluating what they're doing, how they operate, which includes putting people around you who may not agree with you, put people around you who may not operate like you. That's one of the things I have done a lot. Is I've got people who they won't, argue. They'll challenge me on thoughts, and I appreciate that because it helps me understand my position better. But it's like one guy that used to work in the Army. He says, but the way it works is we can voice our opinions. I don't just want drones, but when a decision's made by the top brass, there's what we do. We go. You can't sit there and continue to argue about it. So I think those are the qualities in leaders that will force that type of thing, which is give me your thoughts and ideas. Not people aren't afraid to voice their opinions, but then you got to be the leader that says, all right, we've made a decision and there we're going. And then if people kind of start to wander, you're like, nope, we're going this way. And that's hard. That's hard to do.
Yeah, hard to get people to understand that that's a part of the culture, right? You have the period where you're open to discussion, where there's a lot of back and forth on the way to proceed. But ultimately, you're looking for someone to make a call on what decision that needs to be made. And then everybody needs to get on board with that decision so that you can validate whether or not it was the right call or not. And sometimes it may not be.
Right.
But you have to sort of give everything that you're capable of giving in support of whatever decision was made by the leadership. And guess what? Because sometimes you're going to be in that position. You're going to be the one on the other side of that, expecting folks to to drive towards some goal that you've set, or do something that you've asked your team to do. So yeah, it all works both ways. And I feel like, certainly for me, these experiences continue to change and shape me, because every time I turn a corner, there's some new experience. It's just something that I haven't experienced before. So it's like, hey, now I got to put that in the toolkit, so that I can be ready for the next thing that happens.
And that's that emotional intelligence. Yeah, that's really developing yourself to say, I can, I learned something from there, or I grew a little bit, or, and again, we've all been knocked down. You just get up and dust off and say, okay, that wasn't, you learned something that I don't really do that next time. It was more so a learning story of what not to do, which is also a valuable. I jokingly say to people who would put failures on their resumes, and most people won't raise their hand. I'm like, but wait a minute, if you can teach, if you're trying to get a job at a company and you can teach teach that company how not to do something, that's a valuable lesson that you can use and people are like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So use that, failure or what didn't work out as expected as I can help you avoid that.
Yeah. Why do you think we're so apprehensive about talking about our failures?
I think it's a cultural thing. We're taught, we're taught that success is everything. I mean, look at our sports. We're always talking about the winners. We very rarely talk about the second place, third place, the losers, that type of stuff. We do pick on the ones who are on the bottoms of the bracket, of course. I won't mention which sport teams tend to be at the bottoms of the brackets all the time, but there are those, and everyone knows them. So we've just driven ourselves to this success. Sean Acor has a great thing talking about when he says the problem with success is we set the goal and then we hit it and then we move the goalpost again, then we keep moving the goalposts and we're never there. And the happiness factor, he calls it, is you can't just keep changing the goalpost. But I think we do as a society. If we got a great quarter as a public company, do better next time, do better next time, and do better. And then you're suddenly making decisions based on that, which is a problem.
You hit the nail on the head. What's one of the metrics that we use to evaluate a company's future feasibility? It's year-over-year growth, right? Year-over-year, quarter-over-quarter. We're always looking for that growth factor that seems to, or at least we have taken that metric, and it seems to show strength, at least in the product line and roadmaps and where these companies are headed. Leadership for folks who are trying to break into the field. I have lots of conversations with people, and they're just like, I just need that first opportunity. What advice do you give to people who are looking for that first opportunity? Maybe they've been in industry long enough to develop some competency, so they're a solid performer, but they just haven't been given the nod. What do you tell people to do to prepare for that potential eventuality?
So two areas there that I tell them to focus on. One is, find some good leaders in your organization or around you that will sort of mentor you, like help you guide into what you need to develop, because they may, especially if they know you well, they may be, and they're honest with you, they'll say, I see this, this, and this, and that'll help you understand. But, there's so many opportunities in communities and nonprofits. And I tell people, go volunteer, because guess what? They're going to look for people to help lead. In our local HR group, you can move yourself up to be the president. And honestly, it's actually harder to be the leader of a nonprofit or a volunteer group, because, you say, well, you can't hold their job over them to get them to do something. But, you'll learn persuasion skills. You'll learn how to get things done through people when they're volunteers a lot way. And you can translate that to business. You can say, listen, I'm leading this. And when people start to see that, saying, well, okay, and you tell that story, how you led this community event and did this. I mean, I took on our winter carnival at the University of Vermont. I don't know how. I started with the broomball tournament, which was piece of the carnival, but then I took on the entire winter carnival at the University of Vermont. It was crazy to think about how I did that back then, but it showed people, wow, he knows how to put people together and get things done. And the event went off without too many hitches, and, how to manage when things don't happen as expected. So I think that's what people can do, is there's plenty of opportunities in the community to show you've got it or develop those skills and then bring it into the workplace.
Yeah. So you're touching on something that's very near and dear to me. I'm ending a run as an interim leader of a nonprofit. I've been doing it for 2+ years, and I'm stepping down and transitioning it over to someone else. And I've had a lot of leadership experiences, and I tell people all the time, I think I've even blogged about this, leading in the nonprofit space is the most difficult thing I've ever done. It is without the incentives that you normally have that you can use to motivate people and to drive them towards execution. You have a group of people who are engaged in a passion topic, but at the same time, that passion topic gets prioritized and or deprioritized depending on all the other things they have going on in their lives. And I have just found it to be a grueling. I now have an appreciation for people who spend their whole careers in the space because, as you were describing it's great if you're going to do a project, something with a beginning and an end, and you just know you have to hit a particular mark. But if you engage in that kind of leadership your entire career, I have to believe that the folks who have been successful at that are probably some of the best leaders. And I'm not claiming to have been successful. I literally, I feel like I'm bumping my head and knees with every corner I turn leading in the nonprofit space, but it's been a huge learning experience for me. I think I might start having on a series of guests who have done that for a very long period of time because they got some secrets. They definitely, and if they've been good at it, they have learned some things about influencing people in an environment where you can't hold a paycheck over their heads, you can't hold the bonus over their heads, you can't say if you guys get this done early, there are rewards waiting for you in nirvana. Like none of that is available to you. And yet and still you got to produce results. And oh, by the way, if you're like me, you're probably out there asking for money too.
Yep.
Man, just super challenging.
Yeah,
Super
it
challenging.
is. And, it's funny because I go back to Dan Pink's book called Drive, and he talks about the three things, the external versus intrinsic motivations. And he talks about how intrinsic is the way you really get people motivated. And it's through autonomy, mastery, and purpose. He talks about purpose. And I think that's one of the reasons why when you watch some of these nonprofits, because some of those are very purposeful. So if you can ignite that passion in people, that motivation in people, give them a little autonomy, mastery, and then give them a purpose, I think you'll find that's what you'll hear from them. They may not know it that way, but that's what they'll probably come back and say. They were able just to ignite people's passion about the purpose and bring them together and get stuff done, keep them focused.
I found it hard to stay motivated, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, it's like, one hit after the next, looking for those very, very brief moments of positive outcomes. And you get those, and you do want to take time to acknowledge those positive outcomes, but then it's like on to the next thing again, especially if you're raising money. It's like, okay, we got that big check in. Where's the next one? How do we go after that next one? Who's the audience that we need to be speaking to? So just very challenging, very challenging.
Yep, absolutely.
How'd you get into HR?
I fell into it, I jokingly say. So I worked for a very large financial institution as an IT guy. I was managing their IT teams and IT projects. And a job opened up and this organization was really good. A tremendous HR function, very well defined. They started to get to, we could identify high potentials, all this stuff. Well, I apparently was identified as someone that was more than just an IT leader because I had my teaching background. I mean, I was a technical trainer too. So they moved me into learning and development to take on their facilitator team. And then when I started doing that well, they said, he can do more. So then they put me in charge of the entire operations center, which is about 3,000 people at the time, all the HR functions. I didn't know what employee relations was. I didn't, talent acquisition, I hadn't done much. I had to learn payroll and benefits. I had to learn all this stuff. They taught me well. I had good professionals working on the teams. And then they threw me into talent acquisition worldwide. This company, we hired about 6,000 people worldwide, around 350 locations around the world. So it was a challenge that I had to step up and learn very fast. Now, I had some of the knowledge. I just had to define it, understand it, and learn from some great people.
What are some of the leadership skills that you think are particularly useful in the human resources world?
I think the biggest thing is, for HR professionals, I think their biggest challenge is to earn the respect of everyone else in the organization. Because I think HR in particular, whether you're a leader or not, is typically seen as a transactional, very, very back office type thing. Whereas the issue is actually I always tell people I'm a business person that does HR. And when you start to talk about it in that way, then you translate that HR is all about the business. And again, we're all here to make money, save money. That's all you're doing really is if we're in a for-profit, how to make more money or save money so we can make more profit. In the nonprofit world, it's how to take what's given to you, either through a budget or whatever, and allocate it the best way to serve the purpose. There's still, you got to manage your expenses and spending. But anyways, I think HR leaders, when they understand that, I think the strongest thing to be a good HR leader is to understand business. You have to understand business, how it runs, and then use that to help the others. It's one of the things I had to teach the team when I first got to this location I'm at, this company, is there is no real no answer. They'd always someone would come say, no, we can't do that. Now I would say, no, ask more questions and figure out what is it they're trying to do. And then we can come up with a plan. Now they may not want to spend the time or money or whatever, but here's how we can get there. But this is what it takes that way. So you're being an advisor. I got my team finally saying we're all advisors. I think good HR leaders see themselves as advisors, not as the principal who manages the discipline.
Yeah. That's a great perspective to have. I think that oftentimes we don't spend enough time emphasizing the need to get to yes, right? This idea that if someone comes to you with a problem, the easy answer oftentimes is say, well, here's what the rule states. So, right. Follow the rule and okay, on to the next thing. But sometimes you need to help people navigate scenarios and come up with answers and solutions that actually help them get to an answer on it. And maybe does it solve 100% of what they're looking for, but maybe it gets that 90% done and gets the mission accomplished. And I think we don't spend enough time. I see way too much in the way of people who find it easy to say no. And I'm wondering whether or not that's something that's baked into people, or how people learn to sort of understand that getting to yes actually helps the team more so than the easy no.
Yep. Well, I think, it's easy to say no because if someone's coming to you saying, hey, I need your help to do all this stuff. And you're like, well, I already got enough stuff to do. So it's easier just to say, nope, I'm fine. Because I got to change what I'm doing, or I'm going to have to take more time. It's going to cost me more time and energy to do this. So it's just easier to say, I'm not going to bother with that. But I'm a firm believer in that. And we also teach our leaders the Eisenhower matrix, which is the urgent and important quadrant, to really understand when someone needs something from you or you need something from your team. Define the urgency and the importance, because don't assume they're understanding it, and don't assume, because again, every team is going to think everything the leader comes, and when the CEO comes and asks for something, everyone's going to assume it's urgent and important. You got to drop everything and do it now. Well, we teach our CEO, don't necessarily, if you ask for something, that's great, but define. Is this urgent or is this important, and how much? Because otherwise people will drop.
So people know how to prioritize, right?
Correct.
No, that's definitely a skill, and where I've seen folks deploy that kind of responsiveness and say things like, hey, here's something I'd like for you to look into, and then end it with, this is pretty low on the priority.
Correct.
I mean, how helpful is that as you walk off and you understand,
exactly.
Okay, I need to get this done, but the boss just told me where it falls in the rank stack of the other responsibilities I have. It creates clarity, which I think is something.
I learned it the hard way, because as I moved up into the ranks and got into senior management and started just asking for stuff, right? Then I realized one day when everyone dropped everything and did it, and I'm like, well, you're all supposed to be focused on your work. Like, well, you wanted this. Okay, that was my fault.
Right.
I only needed it as information for like a presentation in 2 weeks, but I didn't share that with them. So
You touched on something a few minutes ago that I think is interesting. As I think about HR, typically responsible for learning and development, right, of employees, which is a huge responsibility. So not a transactional thing. It's a responsibility that falls within a department to actually invest in its people, right? How have you been able to balance that in terms of your responsibilities? Where do you see that fall in the rank stack of all the things that you have to do?
Yeah, so it's funny. We've built some phenomenal. My previous organization, and I've done it here at the current place. We built really good leadership development programs. We require every leader, anyone that moves into leadership, comes into the organization from somewhere else. I don't care how long they've been a leader. They're required to go through a 2-day leadership program, a management development program. And there's the reason for that is, one is we show them our way. Like, I know how you do timekeeping at your previous place, but this is how we manage it here. So we show the basics, foundation. But then we show them about why discipline is not a punitive thing at our organization. Discipline's about recorrecting actions, getting them to understand what they're not doing well, whether it's performance, behavior, whatever it is, separating performance from behavior issues. Those are different types of things. So we really go through all this because I've taught people, and leaders start to understand this. The better you do at the front end of helping leaders understand how to take care of stuff. When something's going on in the team, don't let it fester. Come to HR. That's our biggest thing. Come talk to us. We are your advisors. We'll guide you. We'll help you understand what might be going on. The better you do that up front, the less discipline and issues you have on the backside. So I've taught people that investment up front, because you're right. Everyone's always saying, oh, it's expensive. What's the ROI on that? I'm like, my ROI is turnover should decrease. Engagement should raise up, because if you've got leaders understanding, and that doesn't mean we're always going to be perfect, but if you got leaders understanding up front what you expect of them or how to do things or how to handle situations, it's a lot easier. I've had a situation once before where a leader had a problem with a team member. Someone threw something at someone. And again, very bad situation. It festered. They went to the leader. The leader went to their leader. They couldn't figure out how to solve this problem between these two employees. And it went on for months until something really happened. Well, when we got involved, HR got involved in our investigation, the two individuals were warned, but actually the two leaders were disciplined for not coming to HR when that stuff was happening and say, we need your help. So that was before we instituted the program, and we realized we got to teach people.
Yeah, I mean, even that. I mean, helping leaders get through and solve what feels like sometimes intractable, really, really difficult problems in the workspace. Helping folks through that. That's a huge responsibility.
Yes.
I think that the need to have that kind of assist and lift and engaging with problems is very important. Again, just a huge expansion of the
and just
HR
be there to be advisors. Yeah, just let them know they're not alone. That's the thing is, when they exhaust their, even up through their rank, and that's where it's worked, because now they come to us and say, all right, we got this issue. What are your thoughts? And we kind of say, well, what's been happening? And generally we don't have to get involved, but we're just advising them on, here's some tactics you might try.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you're seeing in the in recruiting space? Maybe challenges based both on economic challenges that we see on the landscape, but also just the recruiting space, which I'm sure has changed drastically, probably over the past decade.
It has, and actually it hasn't gotten any better. I wish I could say it's gotten better. I mean, I wrote my first book, 6 years ago now? Yeah, in 2018, 7 years ago. Wow, it's quite a long time. But it was talking about, and I said this in my speeches back then, I said it in the book, and it's still true today. It's really not a skills gap. It's a value gap in the marketplace. It's hard with a flat resume and all this stuff to determine the value a person is going to bring to a job. And it's hard to define what's the value of this job necessarily. You got a job description, but it doesn't always really define the true value. It's the matching of that value. How is this person going to do this? And a lot of times we default to check boxes. Did they have this number of years of experience to do this type of function and this type of thing? We've broken our leaders away from that. And it's not easy sometimes, especially in the technical world. Well, they got to have 5 years experience on this type technology. Why? And they're like, well, because then they know how to do it. What if someone knew how to do it in 2 years and did it really well? Why are you ignoring them? And as my Army guy would say, he says, being 5 years and just doing that just meant that they breathed air and didn't blow something up. How do you know they actually knew what they were doing? That type of thing. So yeah, he's like the Army guy. He's good. He's my VP of talent development. So that's the way he operates, which I love it. But we teach people that. So it's this value. Because another thing too is the potential of someone is part of their value. Well, that's hard to measure, because you're like, well, they've never done this job, but am I going to hire them in? I, in a heartbeat, do that if you can identify their potential. You see they've done something similar somewhere else. You can be like, and that's where I like to use. We don't use AI for job selection, but I like to use it to say, for a job profile, what were some areas that people may show potential that could be successful in this? And that helps you sort of understand that confidence.
That's a great use of it. Great use.
Yeah.
Any tidbits or things in the interviewing process that you think have worked particularly well in terms of being able to weed through and see particular skill sets that you just can't ask, yes or no questions about?
Yeah. I like to ask questions that are related to how they think, because again, I want to see how they critical thinking, problem solving, because as you know, in most professions, we can teach people the skills in a profession if they've got the aptitude, but really getting them to think problem solving, thinking, I like to ask those types of questions. They call them behavioral questions, but I dig deeper, and it's more about just, if they made a trip and went somewhere, how'd you decide where to go? What did you do to get started? Just something simple that walks me down how they're thinking and reasoning, which throws a lot of people off, because they're like, this has nothing to do with, I was here ready to talk about all the great things I do in the job. And I'm like, sure, we'll talk about that in a second, but let's just talk about this. So it helps me understand how they think.
Okay, outstanding. Preparing people for the different stages. We talked about, higher level advancement and taking on larger groups. There's some particular skills I think that are necessary at that, the zenith level of the CEO in many corporations. And I don't know that, that we see, at least outwardly facing, clear examples of like what success looks like for CEOs. I see so much information come out around, someone's got some huge compensation package, but at the same time, company's been underperforming, right? So there's this sort of dichotomy of what makes a great CEO, someone that drives a large scale organization, a large scale success. What would you think are the things, or what would you say are the elements of someone in the CEO lanes that represents, hey, that person's not only knocking it out of the park, but they've got the qualities and things necessary to get it done?
In my case, when I look at leaders and try to figure out, and there's a couple of them out there right now, it's hard to find their team because their team's not out there. Like sometimes you see the team that works for the CEO. I'm always interested in the people the CEO has working for him or her, because to me, that tells me a lot about the CEO.
Right.
That tells me who did they choose to surround themselves with. If it's a bunch of yes people, that's probably not going to be successful. But if it's they put people in there who will challenge them or help them understand what they're doing and set that vision, because as we were talking before, that sets the vision, and then it's got to roll down. The vision's got to keep going all the way down. Generally, those people are usually good communicators. The CEO that can do that, and again, they may not be the most outgoing, charismatic, and you see them all the time out there, but behind the scenes, they've got the ability to communicate to their team why things are important. When things aren't going well, they're holding them accountable. To me, that's the CEO that's really going to get it done. I like to look at the team of people they got around them and who's willing to work for them.
Yeah, no, great answers, and we've amplified on this show. No pun intended, but that is part of the name, amplified. We've amplified on this show the idea that communication skills can be a huge differentiator, and I think it's the one skill, I call it the MVP. It's the one skill that really differentiates, what is commonly referred to as good to great. But the great leaders are great communicators. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, they have to they don't just set the vision. They basically, we were just talking about it a minute ago, they set the motivation. They keep people motivated and engaged and driven to meet that vision.
Yeah. So you've written a couple of books. What's been typically the subject matter of those books?
The first one was about leadership or about value. You basically, it's called Know, Grow, and Show Your Career Value. So it's all about knowing it, documenting it, growing it, and then showing it, because most people have a hard time, in performance reviews, people don't like to talk about themselves, and it's like, but that's your chance to tell your story. So learn how to do it well. So that was the first one. The second one was a boring. It's how to get HR professionals certified in their PHR. So that's not one that most people they're gonna fall asleep trying to read that one. But that's the second one.
Well, that's outstanding. Any other skills that you deploy in terms of connectivity to your own leadership experience? Do you do any blogging or anything like that? What do you do to capture those experiences? Writing a book's fantastic. I explored that and done something similar in the lanes that I'm in. What do you do to capture your experiences and reflect on them?
A lot of it is I do writing. I write for, and in particular, HR magazines. I've got articles out there quite often. So I do write because it forces me to kind of put my thoughts together in ways of how am I successful doing this? And then speaking. I love speaking. It's another way that I get out in front, especially HR professionals, and speak to them. Business people too. I get invited to a lot of community groups, the business functions where they want me to come in and talk about different topics, whether it's leadership, and nowadays a lot more about AI. But it's really, I find that the writing and speaking is writing articles and stuff. I write on LinkedIn quite a bit too. I have newsletters out there, but it's really the writing and then the speaking is how I get the message out.
What are you excited about in the business world?
Well, right now, artificial intelligence, because now what's scaring most people, I think when you develop what I call your AIQ, your artificial intelligence quotient, like your IQ and your EQ, that you start to understand these things, you understand what they do well and what they don't do well. There's a lot of things AI does not do well, and it's not going to do it well, and humans aren't going to be taken over by it. There's so much out there. But when you start to leverage them, we're the workforce of the future. Had a guy the other day talk about the 165 million workers in this country, and the fact that he thinks there's going to be 250 million AI agents added to that workforce within the next year or so, which is going to dramatically change our GDP. It's going to dramatically change how we work, which I think is going to happen. I think we're going to get rid of a lot of the mundane stuff, the clickety-clack stuff we do, and focus on some of the great stuff we want to do. I think it's going to change how we engage people to work.
Yeah, I'm excited about it as well. I think that this new tool that has basically become widely available to people is going to transform certain aspects of how we work. Certainly, there will be some erosion, as you stated, of what might be considered entry level or low level mundane work. But I think the upward ceiling, like the capabilities and things that will yield dividends from this kind of experience, will just be tremendous. And
it's just a baby,
it
like
is
2.5 years old. It's an infant still.
It'll take us in all new directions. Really cool stuff. I don't want to end on a negative note, but anything that you're pessimistic about in terms of what you're seeing in the business world?
People getting along, trying not to, and whether it's business and communities, it's just making sure we all understand we're in this together and things aren't going to work out as we all want or expect. Right. And just getting everyone to understand we're a lot more alike than we think. And just focused on what are we trying to do to help ourselves. I just, in the business world too, we kind of see it a little bit happening. But I'm optimistic about my pessimism in a way because we're humans and I think we'll figure it out. All
right. Super encouraging. Paul, really great conversation. I appreciate you coming into the studio here on Amplify, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. We look forward to having future conversations with you. So appreciate you joining the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, this is MK Palmore. We'll see you guys next time on Amplified, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast.
Thank you for listening to Amplified, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. If you're ready to elevate your personal leadership and drive your team's success, connect with Apogee Global RMS for custom coaching and development solutions. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of impactful personal leadership strategies. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and empowering those around you. Together, we'll amplify your success